You wake up in complete darkness. The air is thick with smoke and the unmistakable smell of animals, unwashed bodies, and rotting straw. Your back aches from sleeping on a wooden board covered with a thin layer of hay. Something small and furry scurries across your legs. Congratulations, you're a peasant in the Middle Ages and you've just survived another night. The question is, can you survive the day ahead? Welcome to medieval Europe, a time spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th century. A period so challenging, so unforgiving, that simply making it to your 30th birthday was considered an achievement. This wasn't a world of knights in shining armor and romantic castles. This was a world where a simple cut could kill you, where your dinner depended on whether you had no way to predict, and where the church told you that suffering now meant rewards later. Spoiler alert, later never came for most people. But here's the fascinating part. People didn't just survive the Middle Ages. They built communities, raised families, created art, told stories, and found moments of joy in the most unlikely places. They developed systems, however flawed, to deal with disasters, disease, and death. They learned to read the signs of nature, to preserve food through brutal winters, and to find entertainment in a world without electricity, running water, or anything we'd recognize as modern medicine. So how did they do it? How did millions of people endure centuries of what we'd consider absolute misery? That's what we're going to explore. Not the sugar-coated version from Hollywood movies, but the real, gritty, sometimes disgusting truth about medieval survival. Chapter 1. Waking Up. Medieval. The rooster hasn't even crowed yet, but you're already awake. Not by choice. Your bladder is screaming at you and the cold has seeped into your bones. It's still dark outside, probably around 4 or 5 in the morning. You've learned to gauge time by the quality of darkness. There's the pitch black of midnight, the slightly less terrifying darkness of pre-dawn, and the gray gloom that means you're already late for work. You swing your legs off the wooden platform that serves as your bed. The floor is dirt, covered with rushes and straw that should have been changed weeks ago. You can't see them, but you can feel the insects moving beneath your feet. Fleas, mostly. Maybe some lice. They're constant companions in medieval life, so common that people barely notice them anymore. You do, though, because you're not really medieval. You're just visiting this nightmare. The house you're in is smaller than most modern bathrooms. One room may be 15 feet by 15 feet if you're lucky. The walls are wattle and daub, basically sticks woven together and covered with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. Yes, you're living in a house partially made of poop. The roof is thatch, which is great for insulation, but also great for harboring rodents, birds, and insects. Sometimes things fall from the ceiling while you sleep. You've learned not to ask what they are. In this single room lives you, your spouse, your 4 children, your elderly mother, and occasionally a pig or some chickens when the weather gets really bad. Privacy is not a medieval concept. Neither is personal space. The idea that every person deserves their own room would seem as absurd to medieval people as the idea that every person deserves their own castle. You need to pee. Where do you go? If you're lucky, there's a bucket in the corner. If you're not lucky, you step outside into the freezing pre-dawn darkness and do your business in a designated spot near the house. Toilet paper doesn't exist. Neither does soap. You make do with leaves, moss, or your hand, which you'll sort of rinse later with cold water if you remember. This is the medieval morning routine. No hot shower, no coffee, no checking your phone. Just you, the darkness, the cold, and the dawning realization that you have 14 hours of back-breaking labor ahead of you. And that's a good day. But before we get to the work, let's talk about breakfast. Actually, let's not. Because most medieval peasants didn't eat breakfast. Not because they were intermittent fasting for health benefits, but because they literally didn't have enough food. The first meal of the day usually came around noon, and it was rarely what you'd call appetizing. If you're fortunate, you'll eat a thick pottage later. This is basically a soup made from whatever vegetables you manage to grow, boiled in water with maybe some herbs if you're fancy. Oats, barley, peas, beans, onions, garlic, cabbage, all thrown into a pot and boiled until it forms a grayish-brown sludge. You eat this almost every single day, sometimes twice a day if there's enough. Meat is a luxury. Most peasants eat meat only a few times a year, usually during festivals or celebrations. The animals are far too valuable to kill for food. They provide labor, milk, eggs, and wool. Slaughtering them for a meal would be like burning your car for warmth. Technically possible, but strategically idiotic. So you start your day hungry, cold, and tired. The sun hasn't risen yet, but work is calling. Because in the Middle Ages, your survival depends entirely on how much you can produce. There's no safety net, no unemployment benefits, no retirement plan. You work until you physically can't anymore, and then you hope your children take care of you. If they survive, which is far from guaranteed. Welcome to day one of medieval survival, and we haven't even gotten to the hard part yet. Chapter 2, The Lord of the Manor, and Why He's Not Your Friend. You step outside into the gray pre-dawn light, and the first thing you see is the manor house on the hill. It's visible from everywhere in the village, which is exactly the point. The Lord wants you to remember, every single moment of every single day, who's in charge. And it's not you. Let's talk about the feudal system, because understanding this is crucial to understanding how anyone survived the Middle Ages. Imagine a pyramid. At the very top is the king. Below him are the nobles and lords. Below them are the knights. And at the bottom, crushed under the weight of everyone else, are you, the peasant, the serf, the person who does all the actual work while everyone else takes credit for it. Here's how it works. The Lord owns all the land, all of it. That little plot where you grow your vegetables, his. The forest where you gather firewood, his. The stream where you catch fish, also his. You don't own anything except maybe some tools and the clothes on your back, and even those are debatable. In exchange for being allowed to live on his land and not starve to death, you owe the Lord labor, lots of labor. Usually 3 days a week, sometimes more during harvest season. You work his fields, tend his animals, repair his buildings, and generally do whatever he demands. The other days of the week, you're free to work your own plot of land to grow food for your family. Sounds fair, right? 3 days for him, 3 days for you? Except it's not 3 days. It's the best 3 days. During planting season, you're working the Lord's fields when you should be planting your own crops. During harvest, you're bringing in his grain while yours sits in the field, vulnerable to weather, animals, and theft. By the time you get to your own plot, you're exhausted, the light is failing, and you're already behind schedule. But wait, there's more. On top of the labor, you owe the Lord a portion of everything you produce. Grain, vegetables, eggs, cheese, whatever you manage to create, a chunk of it goes to the manor. This is called a tithe, and it's not negotiable. You also owe fees for the privilege of using the Lord's mill to grind your grain, his oven to bake your bread, and his press to make oil. Can't you just build your own? No. That's illegal. The Lord has a monopoly on these essential services, and he charges whatever he wants. And if you think you can just leave and find a better situation elsewhere, think again. As a serf, you're tied to the land. You can't move without permission. You can't change jobs. You can't even marry without the Lord's approval, which often comes with another fee. You're not quite a slave, but you're not exactly free either. You're somewhere in that murky middle ground that medieval society specialized in creating. The Lord justifies all this through a concept called protection. He protects you from bandits, rival lords, and invading armies. Does he actually do this? Sometimes, but more often, The Lord is the biggest threat to your safety. If he decides he needs more labor or more taxes, there's nothing you can do about it. Complain, and you might find yourself in the stocks, or worse. So how do you survive under this system? Carefully. Very carefully. You learn to be invisible when the Lord's bailiff comes around assessing crops. You learn to hide your best vegetables and show only the damaged ones. You learn to exaggerate how hard the work is, how poor the harvest was, how sick your animals are. You become an expert in the art of strategic incompetence, but you also learn to play the game. You show up at the manor on holy days and festivals, demonstrating your loyalty. You laugh at the Lord's jokes. You bow and scrape and say, "Yes, my Lord, and of course, my Lord," until the words lose all meaning, because the alternative is starvation, eviction, or physical punishment. Medieval survival isn't just about growing food and avoiding disease. It's about navigating a social system designed to keep you in your place. It's about knowing when to work hard and when to appear to work hard. It's about understanding that the Lord needs you as much as you need him, even if he'll never admit it. Because here's the secret they don't tell you about feudalism. The whole system only works if everyone plays along. The Lord can't farm his own fields. He can't grind his own grain or bake his own bread. He needs you. He needs your labor, your skills, your knowledge of the land. Without peasants, lords are just guys with fancy clothes and delusions of grandeur. So you survive by being indispensable, but not threatening, useful, but not ambitious, present, but not noticed. It's a delicate balance, and stepping wrong can have serious consequences. But medieval people perfected this dance over generations. They learned the rules, exploited the loopholes, and found ways to maintain their dignity in a system designed to crush it. The sun is rising now, and you have to get to the Lord's fields. Another day of survival begins, and you haven't even had breakfast yet. Chapter 3. Working the Land, or How to Break Your Back in 10. Easy steps. The fields stretch out before you, acre after acre of heavy soil that needs to be turned, planted, weeded, and harvested. And you're going to do it with tools that would embarrass a modern gardener. Welcome to medieval agriculture, where everything is hard and nothing is easy. Your primary tool is a wooden plow, not a modern steel plow that cuts through soil like butter. A wooden plow that barely scratches the surface and requires an ox or a horse to pull. Except you don't own an ox or a horse. Those cost more than you'll earn in a lifetime. So you share one with 3 other families, which means you get to use it maybe 1 day a week if you're lucky. The rest of the time, you're using a spade. Just you, a piece of sharpened wood or iron, and the earth. Imagine digging your garden, except the garden is several acres, and you have to do it all by hand. Your back starts hurting just thinking about it. Now imagine doing this every single day for months. That's medieval farming. The agricultural calendar dominates everything. In spring, you plow and plant. In summer, you weed and pray for rain, but not too much rain. In autumn, you harvest and pray you've grown enough to survive the winter. In winter, you repair tools, tend animals, and try not to freeze to death. This cycle repeats every year with absolutely no variation. No vacations, no days off, no, "I don't feel like it today." Nature doesn't care about your feelings. Let's talk about what you're actually growing. The main crop is grain. Wheat if you're fortunate, barley or rye if you're not, oats if you're really unlucky. Grain is everything in medieval society. It's food, it's currency, it's survival. Lose your grain crop and you're in serious trouble. But you can't just grow grain. You also need vegetables, onions, garlic, cabbage, peas, beans, leeks, turnips. These grow in the small plot near your house, the one you're allowed to tend during your free time. This garden is often maintained by the women and children of the family, because the men are busy with the grain fields. Everything you grow needs water, But irrigation systems are rare and primitive. You rely on rain. Too little rain and crops wither. Too much rain and they rot in the fields. The weather is your master, and it's a cruel and unpredictable one. Medieval people didn't understand meteorology. They couldn't predict weather patterns or prepare for droughts and floods. They could only react and hope. Fertilizer is animal manure, which you collect from your livestock if you have any, or from the Lord's animals if you don't. You spread this on your fields and hope it's enough to replenish the soil. Crop rotation is practiced but not well understood. Usually, you plant grain one year and leave the field fallow the next, letting it rest and recover. This means you're always working twice as much land as you're actually harvesting. Efficient? No. But medieval people didn't have many options. Weeds are a constant battle. There are no herbicides, no easy solutions. You get on your hands and knees and pull them out one by one. This is usually a job for children, who spend hours in the hot sun picking weeds while their parents do the heavier work. Child labor isn't just accepted in the Middle Ages, it's essential. Families survive because everyone contributes, including children as young as 5 or 6. Then there are the pests. Birds eat your seeds. Rabbits and deer eat your crops. Insects destroy your vegetables. You can't just go to the store and buy pesticides. You set up scarecrows, which don't work. You build fences, which animals jump over. You stand guard in your fields, literally chasing away wildlife by hand. It's exhausting and often futile. Harvest time is both the best and worst part of the year. Best because you finally see the results of months of labor. Worst because you have to bring it all in before weather, animals, or other people destroy it. Entire communities come together for harvest. Men, women, children, everyone who can hold a sickle is out in the fields cutting grain from dawn to dusk. The grain is cut by hand with a sickle, a curved blade that requires you to bend over thousands of times per day. Your back screams, your hands blister. The sun beats down mercilessly. Dust and chaff get in your eyes, your nose, your mouth. You work until you physically can't anymore. Then you work some more because if you don't get the harvest in, you don't eat this winter. Once cut, the grain needs to be bundled into sheaves, dried, threshed to separate the grain from the chaff, winnowed to remove debris, and finally stored. Each step requires labor. Each step offers opportunities for things to go wrong. Rain can ruin dried grain. Mold can destroy stored grain. Rodents can eat through your winter supplies in weeks. And remember, a significant portion of what you harvest doesn't belong to you. The Lord takes his share. The church takes its tithe. You're left with what remains, which hopefully is enough to feed your family until next harvest. If it's not, well, you'll find out what starvation feels like. Medieval people survived this through a combination of factors. First, they were incredibly knowledgeable about their local environment. They knew which plants grew best in which soil, when to plant based on subtle environmental cues, how to read the weather by observing animals and plants. This knowledge was passed down through generations and was essential for survival. Second, they worked together. Harvest wasn't an individual effort, but a community one. Families helped each other, knowing that cooperation meant everyone had a better chance of surviving. The peasant who hoarded labor found himself without help when he needed it most. Third, they were tough. Medieval people lived with a level of physical pain and exhaustion that would hospitalize most modern humans. They simply had no choice but to push through. Rest was a luxury they couldn't afford. The sun is setting, and you're finally done working the Lord's fields. Now you get to go work your own fields for a few hours before it gets too dark to see. Your hands are bleeding, your back is broken, and you're so tired you can barely stand. But the work isn't done. In the Middle Ages, the work is never done. Tomorrow, you'll do it all over again, and the day after that, and the day after that, until the harvest is complete, or you collapse, whichever comes first. Chapter 4. What's for dinner? Spoiler, not much. You stumble back to your tiny house as the last light fades from the sky. Your stomach is growling. You've been working since before dawn with nothing but a crust of bread at midday. Now, finally, it's time for the main meal of the day. Try to contain your excitement. Your wife or mother has been tending the fire all day. Not a fireplace like you're imagining, just a pit in the middle of the earthen floor with stones around it. Smoke rises up and escapes through a hole in the thatched roof. Except most of it doesn't escape. It fills the house with a thick haze that burns your eyes and coats everything in black soot. You've been breathing smoke since birth. It's probably taking years off your life, but you won't live long enough to find out. Hanging over the fire is a pot. The same pot that's been hanging there for years, possibly decades. It's never been properly cleaned because soap is expensive and scrubbing takes time you don't have. The pot is encrusted with layers of old food, giving everything cooked in it a distinctive flavor that you've learned to ignore. Inside the pot is pottage. Again, because pottage is what you eat every single day. Twice a day if you're lucky. It's a thick stew made from whatever vegetables you manage to grow, boiled in water with some herbs. Today's pottage contains turnips, onions, some withered cabbage, and a handful of barley. It looks gray. It smells gray. It probably tastes gray, though you've been eating it so long you're not really sure anymore. There's no meat in the pottage. There's never meat in the pottage unless something terrible has happened. An animal died. A holiday occurred. The Lord was feeling generous. These events are rare. Most medieval peasants go weeks or months without eating meat. Some go years. Bread accompanies the pottage, if there is any. Medieval bread is nothing like modern bread. It's dense, dark, and made from whatever grain you could afford, which usually means rye or barley, sometimes oats. Wheat bread is for rich people. Your bread is heavy, chewy, and often contains bits of grit from the grinding stones used to make flour. Eating medieval bread is an excellent way to wear down your teeth, which is why most medieval people over 30 have serious dental problems. The bread is also frequently moldy or infested with weevils. You eat it anyway. Food is too precious to waste. You've learned to not look too closely at what you're eating. Those little white things in the bread? Probably just flour. Definitely just flour. Don't think about it. To wash down this feast, you have ale. Not because medieval people enjoyed drinking with every meal, but because water is dangerous. Most water sources are contaminated with waste, both human and animal. Drinking water means risking diseases like cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. Ale, even weak ale, is safer because the brewing process kills most pathogens, so everyone drinks ale. Men, women, children, all day long. The ale is weak, usually around 1 to 2% alcohol, just enough to be safe, not enough to get you drunk. Though on bad days, you might wish it were stronger. The ale is cloudy, thick, and slightly sour. It's made from barley, water, and whatever herbs you could find to flavor it. Sometimes it's good. Usually it's not, but it keeps you alive, so you drink it. Meals are eaten quickly. There are no dining tables, no chairs, no plates. You sit on the floor or on wooden stools if your family has them. You eat from wooden bowls using your hands or wooden spoons. Forks don't exist, neither do napkins. You wipe your hands on your clothes or on the floor rushes. The entire family eats together from the same pot. Everyone dips their bread into the pottage, tears off chunks of food with their fingers, and stuffs it into their mouths. Manners are minimal. Talking with your mouth full is normal. Belching is accepted. The goal is to consume as many calories as possible as quickly as possible, because tomorrow you'll need that energy for another day of brutal labor. Portion sizes are not equal. The father, as the primary laborer, gets the most food. Then the older sons who work the fields. Then the mother. The younger children and elderly get whatever's left. In lean times, this means children and old people go hungry. It's not cruelty, it's survival logic. The workers need to maintain their strength, or no one eats at all. What about variety? What about nutrition? Medieval people don't think in those terms. They think in terms of full and hungry. Most peasants suffer from chronic malnutrition. They're not starving to death, but they're not thriving either. They're existing in that middle zone where you have just enough food to keep working, but not enough to be healthy. Vitamin deficiencies are common. Scurvy from lack of vitamin C, rickets from lack of vitamin D, anemia from lack of iron. These conditions aren't diagnosed or treated. They're just part of life. You feel weak and tired? Join the club. Everyone feels weak and tired. Meat, when you do get it, is a major event. Maybe at Christmas, the Lord slaughters an old ox and distributes portions to the peasants. Maybe at Easter, you can afford to kill one of your chickens. These days are remembered and talked about for weeks afterward. The taste of meat becomes almost mythical in your mind, something to dream about during the long months of pottage and bread. Fish is more common than meat, especially if you live near water. The church forbids eating meat on Fridays and during Lent, but fish is allowed. So you catch fish from streams and ponds, or buy salted fish from traveling merchants if you have any money. The fish is often rotten or infested with parasites, but again, you can't be picky. Food is food. Fruits are seasonal and rare. Apples in autumn, berries in summer, maybe some nuts if you can gather them from the forest before everyone else does. You can't store fruit long term without sugar, which is incredibly expensive, so you eat it fresh when it's available, and then you go without for the rest of the year. Cheese and eggs are valuable commodities, usually saved for trading or giving to the Lord as part of your obligations. You might eat eggs occasionally, but they're more valuable as future chickens or as trade goods. Same with cheese. It keeps well, travels well, and can be exchanged for other necessities. Meals are not social occasions in the way we think of them. There's no long conversation, no savoring of flavors, no enjoyment of the dining experience. You eat because you need calories to survive another day. That's it. Food is fuel, nothing more. And yet, medieval people find ways to make it special. On feast days, the pottage might contain some precious herbs or a bit of bacon fat for flavor. On holidays, there might be a pie made with apples or berries. These small luxuries are eagerly anticipated and deeply appreciated because they break the monotony of daily survival. The meal is over in 15 minutes. You've consumed maybe 1,500 calories, barely enough for the work you're doing. Your stomach isn't full, but it's less empty than it was. That's the best you can hope for. You'll go to bed a little hungry, wake up hungry, work all day hungry, and eat just enough to keep going. This is what medieval people ate, every day, for their entire lives. And somehow, they survived, not thrived, not flourished, but survived. Because in the Middle Ages, survival is the highest achievement you can aim for. Chapter 5. Staying healthy. You wake up in the middle of the night with a fever. Your head is pounding, your body aches, and you're shivering despite the fact that you're covered in every scrap of cloth your family owns. This could be anything: a cold, the flu, typhoid, plague, tuberculosis. Who knows? Certainly not medieval medicine. Let's talk about healthcare in the Middle Ages, or more accurately, the complete lack thereof. Medieval people had no understanding of germ theory, no concept of bacteria or viruses, no idea how diseases actually spread. Their medical knowledge was based on ancient Greek and Roman texts, mixed with superstition, religion, and wishful thinking. It was about as effective as you'd expect. The dominant medical theory was the four humors. Medieval doctors believed your body contained four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health meant these humors were in balance. Sickness meant they were out of balance. The treatment for almost everything was to rebalance your humors, usually by removing the excess one. Feeling feverish? You have too much blood. Time for bloodletting. Bloodletting was the go-to treatment for almost every ailment: fever, headache, indigestion, broken bones, madness. It didn't matter. The doctor would cut open a vein and drain some blood into a bowl, sometimes a lot of blood, enough blood that you became weak and dizzy, which the doctor interpreted as a sign the treatment was working. In reality, bloodletting killed thousands of people who might have survived their original illness. But here's the thing. Most medieval people never saw a doctor. Doctors were expensive and rare, found only in cities and serving wealthy clients. Peasants couldn't afford doctors even if they wanted them. Instead, they relied on local healers, usually older women who had learned remedies from their mothers and grandmothers. These healers used herbs, most of which did nothing, but some of which actually worked. Willow bark for pain, which contains a compound similar to aspirin. Honey for wounds, which has actual antibacterial properties. Garlic for infections, which has some antimicrobial effects. Were these healers scientists? No. But through trial and error across generations, they had stumbled onto a few things that genuinely helped. The rest of medieval medicine was prayer, superstition, and desperate hope. Sick people prayed to saints. Specific saints for specific ailments. Saint Apollonia for toothaches. Saint Lucy for eye problems. Saint Sebastian for plague. If prayer didn't work, you might try a pilgrimage to a holy site or purchase a relic, a piece of bone or cloth supposedly from a saint, which was believed to have healing powers. Most of these relics were fake, sold by unscrupulous merchants to desperate people. But medieval people had no way to verify authenticity, and when you're dying, you'll try anything. Let's talk about specific diseases and how medieval people failed to deal with them. The plague, also known as the Black Death, arrived in Europe in 1347 and killed roughly 1/3 of the population. Medieval people had no idea what caused it, actually spread by fleas on rats, but thought it was bad air, evil spirits, or God's punishment for sin. Their responses were varied and equally ineffective. Some people fled cities for the countryside, spreading the disease further. Some locked themselves in their homes and refused to see anyone. Some flagellated themselves in public, believing physical suffering would appease God. Some blamed minorities, particularly Jews, and committed massacres. None of it stopped the plague. Tuberculosis, called consumption because it seemed to consume people from the inside, was another major killer. Victims wasted away slowly, coughing blood, unable to breathe. There was no treatment. People just died, usually infecting their families in the process because no one understood contagion. Dysentery, caused by contaminated water and food, killed through severe diarrhea and dehydration. Medieval people couldn't rehydrate patients effectively. They just watched them die, usually within days. Leprosy was feared above all other diseases. Lepers were forced to live outside communities, ring bells to warn others of their approach, and were essentially treated as already dead. Did isolation help stop the spread? Maybe slightly, but mostly it was a cruel way to treat people suffering from a disease they didn't understand. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous for both mother and baby. No one understood hygiene. Midwives delivered babies with unwashed hands, spreading infections. Complications like breech births or excessive bleeding were usually death sentences. Roughly 1 in 3 women died in childbirth at some point in their lives. Having children was literally risking your life. Dental problems were universal. No toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no dentists. Medieval people sometimes chewed on herbs or rinsed with wine, but mostly they just endured toothaches until the tooth rotted out or an infection killed them. Tooth extraction was performed by barbers with no anesthesia. You held still while someone yanked your tooth out with pliers. People died from tooth infections that spread to their brains. Mental illness was completely misunderstood. People with depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, or any other mental condition were thought to be possessed by demons, punished by God, or simply mad. Treatment involved prayer, exorcism, or confinement. There was no compassion, no understanding, no effective help. Surgery existed, but was primitive and terrifying. No anesthesia beyond alcohol or opium if you were lucky. No antibiotics, no sterile technique. The surgeon cut into you with unwashed tools, did whatever needed doing while you screamed, and then sewed you up and hoped you didn't die from infection. Most people did. Amputations were common for badly broken or infected limbs. The surgeon cut through your leg or arm with a saw, cauterized the wound with a red-hot iron to stop bleeding, and then bound it up. Your chances of survival were maybe 50-50. If you survived, you lived the rest of your life disabled, unable to work, dependent on family or charity to survive. So how did medieval people stay healthy? Mostly they didn't. They lived with chronic pain, infections, parasites, and ailments that would be trivial to treat today but were debilitating or deadly then. Life expectancy at birth was around 30 to 35 years, though if you survived childhood, you might make it to 50 or 60. They survived through luck more than anything else. Strong immune systems helped. Living in less crowded rural areas reduced disease exposure compared to cities. Some people were just genetically better equipped to fight off infections, but mostly, survival was random. 2 people got the same disease. One died, one lived. No one knew why. Medieval people accepted death in a way modern people don't. Death was everywhere, constant, unavoidable. Children died. Adults died. Everyone you knew had lost family members, friends, neighbors. Grief was a permanent condition. You learned to keep going because there was no alternative. Your fever breaks after 3 days. You survived whatever was trying to kill you. Many people don't. You're one of the lucky ones, though you don't feel lucky. You feel weak, exhausted, and you've lost weight you couldn't afford to lose. But you're alive, which in the Middle Ages is the best anyone can hope for. Tomorrow, you'll go back to work. Because you have to. Because there's no sick leave, no recovery time, no rest. You work or you starve. Those are the only options. Welcome to medieval healthcare. Try not to get sick. Chapter 6. When winter comes. The days are getting shorter. The temperature is dropping. You can see your breath in the morning air. Winter is coming, and in the Middle Ages, winter is terrifying. Modern people think of winter as an inconvenience. You turn up the heat, put on a coat, maybe shovel some snow. Medieval people thought of winter as a death sentence waiting to happen. Winter meant cold, hunger, darkness, and isolation. Winter meant watching your food supplies dwindle while months stretched ahead before anything new could be grown. Winter meant people died. Let's start with the cold. Your house has no insulation beyond the mud and straw in the walls. There's a fire in the central pit, but it provides minimal heat and fills the house with smoke. The windows are just holes in the walls, maybe covered with cloth or shutters, but certainly not glass. Glass is for rich people. Wind blows through constantly. You sleep in all your clothes because you only own one set of clothes anyway. You pile on every scrap of cloth, every animal skin, every blanket your family owns. You sleep pressed against your family members for warmth. Body heat is the most reliable heat source you have. The saying 7 in a bed wasn't a nursery rhyme. It was survival strategy. Frostbite is common. You work outside even in freezing temperatures because work doesn't stop for weather. Your fingers and toes go numb. Sometimes they turn black and fall off. You've seen plenty of people missing fingers or parts of their ears. Winter casualties. The elderly and very young suffer most. Old people can't maintain body temperature as effectively. Babies and small children don't have enough body mass to stay warm. Every winter, some members of the community freeze to death in their sleep. You find them in the morning, stiff and cold, and you bury them quickly before the ground freezes completely. Food is the other major winter concern. You preserved what you could from the harvest, but preservation methods are limited. You dried some vegetables and fruits in the sun, though many rotted before they could dry. You salted some meat if you had any, though salt is expensive and meat is rare. You stored grain in sacks, though rodents get into it constantly. Root vegetables, turnips, carrots, onions can be kept in root cellars if you have one. Just a hole in the ground, really, where the temperature stays cool but not freezing. You check them regularly and remove any that are rotting before they contaminate the others. You lose a significant portion to rot anyway. As winter progresses, food becomes scarce. You're eating the same things every day, but portions are shrinking. The pottage is thinner, more water than vegetables. The bread is stretched with sawdust or ground acorns. Your stomach growls constantly. You go to bed hungry and wake up hungry. This is normal. This is winter. The term starving time refers to late winter and early spring, the gap between when stored food runs out and when new crops are ready. This is when people actually starve. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. They become weak, lethargic, susceptible to disease. Their bodies consume themselves, burning muscle and fat for energy until there's nothing left to burn. Children suffer visibly. Their growth stunts. Their bellies swell from malnutrition. Their hair thins and loses color. Some die. Every winter, some children die. You know which families lost children because you see the empty spaces at church, the haunted looks on parents' faces. Firewood is another challenge. The forest belongs to the Lord, and cutting trees without permission is illegal, punishable by fines or worse. But you need fuel to cook and to not freeze. So you gather fallen branches, twigs, anything you can find. You scour the forest floor competing with everyone else for scraps of wood. Sometimes people risk cutting living trees, doing it at night, hoping no one notices. If caught, the punishment is severe. But freezing to death is also severe. You make choices based on which death seems less likely. The fire must be maintained constantly. Let it go out, and restarting it is difficult. You don't have matches or lighters. You have flint and steel, which in cold, wet conditions might not work at all. So someone, usually a woman or older child, tends the fire all day, feeding it carefully, keeping it alive. This is a full-time job. Smoke is worse in winter because you can't open windows and doors to ventilate. The house is sealed tight to keep heat in, which means smoke accumulates. Your eyes burn constantly. You cough. Everyone coughs. The smoke damages your lungs over years, though you don't know that. You just know breathing is harder than it used to be. Darkness is oppressive. Winter days are short, maybe 8 hours of weak sunlight. The rest is darkness. You have no electric lights, no flashlights. You have rush lights if you can afford them, basically reeds soaked in animal fat that burn with a dim smoky flame. Or tallow candles if you're wealthier. Neither provides much light. Most activities stop when the sun goes down. You can't work in the dark. You can't see to cook or clean or mend clothes. You sit by the fire and wait for morning. Sometimes people tell stories. Sometimes they pray. Mostly they just sit in silence, conserving energy, trying to stay warm. The isolation is psychologically taxing. Travel is nearly impossible in winter. Roads become impassable mud or frozen ruts. Snow covers everything. You stay in your village, see the same people every day, have the same conversations. Months pass with no news from the outside world, no visitors, no variation. Cabin fever, though not called that, is real. Families confined together in tiny spaces for months develop tensions. Arguments erupt over nothing. Sometimes they turn violent. Domestic abuse increases in winter. People snap under the pressure of cold, hunger, and darkness. And then there are the storms. Medieval people couldn't predict weather. A storm arrived with no warning. Heavy snow could trap you in your house for days. The roof might collapse under the weight. You might run out of food and firewood before you could dig out. People died trapped in their own homes, buried under snow. Flooding was another winter danger. Snow melts, rivers overflow, and your entire village is underwater. Houses wash away, livestock drown, stored food is destroyed. You're left with nothing, starting from zero, hoping the Lord or the church provides aid. They usually don't. Disease spreads easily in winter. Everyone is weakened by cold and hunger, making them vulnerable to illness. You're all crammed together in small spaces, breathing the same air, sharing germs. One person gets sick, everyone gets sick. Winter epidemics kill entire families. Medieval people had traditions to cope with winter's psychological toll. Midwinter festivals, Christmas celebrations, gave people something to look forward to. Even in poverty, communities came together for feasts, sharing what little food they had, singing, drinking, pretending things weren't as bad as they were. These celebrations served a survival purpose. They broke the monotony, provided hope, reminded people they weren't alone in their suffering. The Lord might provide extra food or ale at Christmas, a token gesture, but meaningful to people on the edge of starvation. Religious faith was crucial. Medieval people believed suffering in this life would be rewarded in the next. Winter hardships were tests from God, opportunities to demonstrate faith and patience. This belief helped people endure conditions that might otherwise drive them to despair or suicide. Some people didn't make it. Every winter claimed lives. The old, the sick, the very young, anyone weakened by hunger or cold. You learned to accept this. Death was part of life, and winter was death's favorite season. Spring finally arrives, usually around March or April depending on your location. The snow melts, the days lengthen, you can finally work outside without freezing, but you're weak, malnourished, exhausted. You've survived winter, but barely, and now you have to plant crops, work the fields, do all the things you did last year. The cycle continues. Medieval people survived winter through endurance, community support, religious faith, and luck. Lots of luck. Some winters were mild, and people did fine. Other winters were brutal, and populations decreased significantly. You never knew which it would be until you were living through it. Winter in the Middle Ages wasn't a season. It was a trial by ordeal, and every year you had to pass it or die trying. Chapter 7. The Role of the Church, Your Soul's Landlord. Sunday morning. You're exhausted from 6 days of brutal labor, but you're hauling yourself out of bed anyway because missing church is not an option. In medieval society, the church isn't just a religious institution. It's the government, the social services agency, the education system, and the moral police all rolled into one. And you better show up, or there will be consequences. The church building is the largest structure in your village, bigger even than the Lord's Manor. This is intentional. The church wants to be literally and figuratively the center of your world. It succeeds. The church is where you were baptized, where you'll be married, where you'll be buried. Your entire life is bracketed by church rituals. You enter the cold stone building. There are no seats for peasants. Those are reserved for wealthy families. You stand for the entire service, which lasts at least an hour, sometimes 2 or 3. Your feet ache, your back hurts. You don't care. Or rather, you do care, but complaining would be sinful, so you suffer in silence like a good Christian. The service is in Latin, which you don't speak or understand. The priest chants words that might as well be magical incantations for all the meaning they convey. But that's fine. Understanding isn't the point. Obedience is the point. You're here to demonstrate your submission to God and, by extension, to the church that claims to represent God. The priest delivers a sermon, usually about sin and damnation. He explains in graphic detail what hell is like: eternal fire, demons torturing you, pain that never ends. This isn't meant to comfort you. It's meant to terrify you into proper behavior, and it works. Medieval people genuinely believed in hell, and the fear of it governed their actions. But the sermon isn't just about the afterlife, it's also about current behavior. The priest reminds you to obey the Lord, to pay your tithes, to not steal or lie or commit adultery. The church supports the feudal system because the church benefits from it. Peasants who question authority might start questioning other things, like why the church is so wealthy while they're starving. After the service, you confess your sins to the priest. This is mandatory at least once a year, though many people do it more frequently. You kneel and admit everything: your anger at the Lord, your envy of your neighbor's larger harvest, your lustful thoughts about the widow down the lane. The priest listens and assigns penance. Penance might be prayers, fasting, or donations to the church if you have anything to donate. Serious sins require serious penance. An affair might cost you weeks of fasting. Theft might require public humiliation in addition to prayers. The priest has enormous power over your life because he controls your access to salvation. Excommunication is the ultimate punishment. Being cast out from the church means you're condemned to hell, but it also means you're cut off from community. No one will trade with you, speak to you, or help you. You become a ghost, living, but not really alive. It's a death sentence, socially and spiritually. So you do whatever the church tells you to avoid it. The church also controls major life events. Want to get married? You need the church's blessing. Want a divorce? Forget it. The church doesn't recognize divorce. You're stuck with your spouse until death, no matter how miserable you are. Want to start a business? Better make sure it doesn't violate church teachings about usury and fair prices. Tithes are a constant burden. You owe the church 10% of everything you produce: grain, vegetables, eggs, cheese, labor, whatever. 10%. This is in addition to what you owe the Lord. Between church and nobility, you're lucky to keep 40% of what you produce. The other 60% goes to people who don't do the actual work. You might think the church uses these resources to help the poor, and sometimes it does. Churches run hospitals, provide food to the destitute, offer shelter to travelers. But most church wealth goes to building cathedrals, buying gold chalices, and supporting a clergy that lives far better than the peasants they serve. The local priest might be poor, barely better off than his congregation. Or he might be corrupt, taking bribes, fathering children despite his vow of celibacy, drinking and gambling away church funds. It varies. Some priests genuinely care about their flock. Others see their position as a job, nothing more. Higher up the church hierarchy, corruption is rampant. Bishops and cardinals live in luxury that would make nobles jealous. They wear silk and gold, feast on delicacies, maintain multiple residences. They claim to serve God, but they serve themselves. Everyone knows it. No one can do anything about it. The sale of indulgences is particularly galling. The church claims it can reduce your time in purgatory in exchange for money. Not eliminate your sins, just reduce the punishment. It's a fundraising scheme, blatant and shameless. But people pay because they're terrified of the afterlife, and this seems like insurance. Saints play a huge role in medieval religion. There are hundreds of saints, each responsible for different aspects of life. You pray to Saint Christopher for safe travel, Saint Anthony to find lost items, Saint Jude for hopeless causes. Your entire life is mediated through saints, as if God is too busy to deal with your small problems directly. Relics, pieces of saints' bodies or belongings, are highly valued. A church with a famous relic attracts pilgrims, and pilgrims bring money. So churches compete to acquire relics, real or fake. There are enough pieces of the true cross floating around Europe to build a small forest, but no one questions it. Pilgrimages are both spiritual journeys and vacations from regular life. If you can afford it, you might travel to a holy site to pray and seek miracles. This gives you a break from work, a chance to see new places, and an excuse to leave your village. It's one of the few adventures available to medieval peasants. But pilgrimages are also dangerous. Roads are unsafe, bandits are common, diseases spread easily among travelers. Many pilgrims die on the journey, but dying while on pilgrimage might guarantee your salvation, so some people consider it a good death. The church calendar structures your entire year: saints' days, holy days, feast days, fast days. You observe them all. Some require you to stop work and attend special services. Others require fasting, consuming only bread and water. The church dictates not just your spiritual life, but your physical life too. Fasting is particularly burdensome. Lent lasts 40 days. You're already malnourished, and now you're supposed to eat even less. You do it because failing to fast is a sin, but it weakens you further. People die during Lent, their bodies too depleted to fight off illness. Feast days are the opposite. Christmas, Easter, major saints' days. These are times of celebration when even peasants might eat meat and drink extra ale. The church encourages these celebrations because they reinforce community bonds and give people reasons to stay faithful. Women's relationship with the church is complicated. The church teaches that women are inferior to men, more prone to sin because of Eve's role in the fall. Women can't be priests, can't preach, can't handle the sacred elements. They're meant to be silent, obedient, and subordinate. But women also find power within the church. Becoming a nun is one of the few ways a woman can avoid marriage and childbirth. Nuns live communally, manage their own affairs, and sometimes achieve significant authority. It's not freedom exactly, but it's more autonomy than most women have. The church's teachings on sexuality are strict and often unrealistic. Sex is only for procreation within marriage. Enjoying it is sinful. Contraception is forbidden. Masturbation is forbidden. Homosexuality is punished by death. The church wants to control the most intimate aspects of people's lives and largely succeeds through fear and shame. Despite all this, or maybe because of it, medieval people are genuinely religious. They believe in God, in heaven and hell, in sin and salvation. Their faith provides comfort in an incredibly hard life. The promise of heaven makes earthly suffering bearable. If this life is terrible, but the next is eternal bliss, you can endure anything. The church understands this and exploits it. Keep people focused on the afterlife, and they won't rebel against current injustices. Tell them suffering is good for the soul, and they'll accept their suffering. Convince them that challenging authority means damnation, and they'll submit to any authority. But the church also provides genuine community and support. Church buildings are gathering places. Religious festivals bring people together. In a world of isolation and hardship, the church creates connections, shared experiences, common purpose. It's manipulative, but it's also real. You leave church and return to your tiny house. You've spent your morning standing in a cold building, listening to words you don't understand, being reminded that you're a sinner, being told to accept your suffering. And next Sunday, you'll do it all again. Because in the Middle Ages, the church isn't optional. It's the most powerful force in your life besides nature itself. Chapter 8. Getting Sick and Dying, the Medieval Specialty. Let's be honest about something. In the Middle Ages, you're probably going to die young and painfully. Death is not some distant possibility to be contemplated in old age. It's a constant companion, walking beside you every day, waiting for an opportunity. The numbers are sobering. If you're born in medieval Europe, you have roughly a 30 to 40% chance of dying before your 5th birthday. If you make it to 5, congratulations, your odds improve significantly. But not by much. Average life expectancy at birth hovers around 30 to 35 years. This doesn't mean everyone dies at 30. It means so many people die as children that it drags the average down. But let's say you're lucky. You survive childhood diseases. You avoid accidents. you make it to adulthood. What kills you then? Let's count the ways. Infection is the biggest killer. Any break in the skin, any cut or scrape can become infected. And once infected, you're in trouble. No antibiotics exist. Your body has to fight off the infection alone. Sometimes it wins. Often it doesn't. A simple cut while working the fields can kill you. It gets dirty, which it will because everything is dirty. Bacteria enter the wound. Your body responds with inflammation, pus, fever. If you're lucky, the infection stays local and eventually resolves. If you're unlucky, it spreads to your blood. Sepsis develops. You die within days, fevered and delirious. Tetanus from puncture wounds is particularly horrible. The bacteria produce toxins that cause your muscles to spasm uncontrollably. Your jaw locks, hence the name lockjaw. You can't eat, can't drink, can barely breathe. You remain conscious while your body tears itself apart with convulsions. Death comes from exhaustion or suffocation. Medieval people call it a curse. It's just bacteria, but the effect is the same. Childbirth remains one of the most dangerous events in a woman's life. Even a normal delivery is risky. Excessive bleeding can kill in minutes. The placenta might not deliver, causing fatal hemorrhaging. The baby might be positioned wrong, getting stuck, killing both mother and child. Infections after childbirth, puerperal fever, kill thousands of women. The midwife's unwashed hands introduce bacteria. The mother develops fever, chills, and pain. Within a week, she's dead. Her husband is left with a newborn and possibly several other children. His chances of remarrying are good because women die so often that widowers are common. But the new wife faces the same risks when she gives birth. Accidents are frequent in a world filled with hazards. Farm work is dangerous. You're using sharp tools, working with large animals, climbing on roofs to repair thatch. Falls break bones. Kicks from horses crush skulls. Plows overturn and pin you beneath them. You drown in rivers while fishing or washing clothes. Construction accidents kill workers regularly. Medieval people build with wood, stone, and minimal safety measures. Scaffolding collapses, stones fall. Workers plummet from heights. If the fall doesn't kill you, the injuries do because there's no effective emergency medicine. Fire is a constant threat. Houses are made of wood and thatch, heated by open flames. Fires start easily and spread quickly. Entire villages burn when wind carries embers from one roof to another. People die in their sleep, overcome by smoke before they can escape. Others rush back into burning buildings to save possessions and never come out. Drowning claims many lives. Rivers are transportation routes and food sources, but they're also dangerous. You fall in while fishing or crossing a bridge. Maybe you never learned to swim because why would you? Your heavy wool clothes soak up water and drag you down. Your family watches helplessly from the bank. Violence is common. Disputes between neighbors turn physical. Arguments in taverns end in stabbings. Bandits rob travelers. Lords wage wars, and peasants get caught in the crossfire. You might die in your own village, killed by someone you've known your entire life over some perceived insult or stolen property. Starvation happens regularly, especially in winter or after a bad harvest. It's not quick. You don't just miss a few meals and die. It takes weeks or months. Your body consumes itself. Fat disappears first, then muscle. Your immune system fails, making you vulnerable to every disease. You become too weak to work, which means no food, which means weaker, a spiral you can't escape. Children starve first. Their bodies have fewer reserves. You watch them wilt, their eyes growing large in their thinning faces, their bellies swelling with malnutrition. You give them your portions, but it's not enough. One morning, you find a child cold in bed. Another member of your family gone. The elderly don't last long either. When food is scarce, the non-workers get fed last. Old people understand this. They've lived through enough hard times to know how it works. Some simply stop eating, saving food for younger family members. They die quietly, having made peace with their fate. Disease epidemics sweep through populations with terrifying regularity. The Black Death is the most famous, but there are others. Typhus, spread by lice. Smallpox, leaving survivors scarred and sometimes blind. Cholera, causing dehydration and death within hours. Dysentery, the bloody flux, particularly lethal to the young and old. You have no way to avoid these diseases, no vaccines, no medications, no understanding of transmission. You just hope you're not in the path when an epidemic arrives. If you are, you pray. That's all you can do. Pray and wait to see if you're among the survivors. Mental illness, though not understood as such, leads to deaths. People suffering from depression might stop eating, essentially committing suicide slowly. Others might be more direct, hanging themselves or drowning themselves. The Church considers suicide a mortal sin, condemning the deceased to hell. But when life becomes unbearable, some people make that choice anyway. The concept of a good death exists in medieval society. A good death is one where you have time to confess your sins, receive last rites, and prepare your soul for judgment. You die in bed, surrounded by family, having made peace with God and man. This is what everyone hopes for. Most people don't get a good death. They die suddenly from accidents or violence. They die unconscious from fever or head trauma. They die alone in fields or forests, their bodies found days later. They die excommunicated, condemned to hell by the Church. A bad death means eternal damnation, adding spiritual terror to physical suffering. Burial practices vary by wealth and status. Nobles get elaborate tombs in churches. Wealthy merchants can afford stone markers. Peasants get holes in the ground. Maybe a wooden cross if their family can afford one. Often, there's no marker at all. Your grave gets reused when the cemetery fills up. Your bones are dug up and placed in a charnel house to make room for fresh bodies. Funeral rituals help the living cope with constant loss. You wash the body, dress it in the best clothes available, and hold a wake. Friends and family gather, tell stories, pray. The body is carried to the church, blessed by the priest, and buried. It provides closure, a way to mark the passage from life to death. Grief is complicated by its frequency. You lose siblings, children, spouses, parents. So many deaths that you become somewhat numb to them. Not uncaring, but unable to fully process each loss before the next one arrives. You develop a fatalistic attitude. Death comes when it comes. You can't control it. You can only endure. Children are particularly vulnerable, and parents know it. They name babies after dead siblings. They delay baptism because many infants die within days of birth, and there's no point in naming something that might not survive. It seems cruel, but it's protective. Better to not become too attached until the child proves hardy. Some deaths are considered suspicious. A sudden, unexplained death might be blamed on witchcraft or poisoning. Accusations fly. Someone must be responsible. Medieval people don't accept that death is sometimes random. There must be a cause, a culprit, someone to blame. This leads to witch hunts, false accusations, and more deaths as scapegoats are punished. You live with the constant awareness of your mortality. You see death regularly. You smell it in the streets where bodies are carried to burial. You hear it in the tolling of church bells marking another passing. You feel it in the empty spaces at meals where family members once sat. And yet, life continues. Because it has to. You can't spend every moment grieving or fearing death. You work, you eat, you sleep. You find moments of joy despite everything. You laugh at jokes, enjoy festivals, love your family. Death is always there, but life is too. In the Middle Ages, death isn't an ending to avoid. It's a transition to prepare for. The Church teaches that earthly life is temporary, a test. Real life begins after death in heaven. This belief helps people cope with losing loved ones and face their own mortality. It's simultaneously comforting and terrifying. You're going to die, probably sooner than you want. probably in pain, probably without adequate medical care or surrounded by loved ones. This is the medieval reality. The question isn't if you'll die, it's when and how. And in a world with so many ways to die, the answer is usually unexpectedly and unpleasantly. Chapter 9. Entertainment and Fun. Yes, really. You might think life in the Middle Ages is nothing but work, suffering, and death, and you'd be mostly right. But medieval people do find ways to have fun. They have to. Otherwise, they'd all go insane. So let's talk about what passes for entertainment when you have no electricity, no phones, no modern conveniences whatsoever. Festivals and holy days provide the main breaks from routine. The medieval calendar is packed with them. Christmas, Easter, Saints' Days, harvest festivals. These are times when work stops, at least partially, and communities gather to celebrate. The Lord might provide extra food and ale. You might get to eat meat, a rare treat. There's music, dancing, games. Dancing is particularly popular, not formal ballroom dancing, peasant dancing, circle dances, line dances, partner dances. The music is provided by whatever instruments people can make or afford. Drums, flutes, simple stringed instruments. The tunes are repetitive, easy to learn, passed down through generations. You dance in the village square or in someone's barn if weather is bad. Everyone participates, young and old. It's exercise, social bonding, and one of the few times you can touch someone of the opposite sex without the church disapproving. Though the church still disapproves. They claim dancing leads to lust and sin. They're probably right, but people dance anyway. Singing is another common entertainment. Work songs help pass time during tedious labor. Lullabies soothe children. Religious hymns are performed at church. Tavern songs, often bawdy and crude, are sung while drinking. Most people can't read music or even read at all, but they learn songs by hearing them and passing them along orally. Storytelling is huge. In a world without books or literacy for most people, oral tradition is how information and entertainment spread. Older people tell stories about the past, mixing history with legend until it's impossible to separate truth from fiction. Traveling minstrels bring news and tales from other regions, their stories eagerly consumed by isolated communities hungry for novelty. The stories are often fantastical. Knights, dragons, magic, romance. They provide escape from the dreary reality of medieval life. You might be a starving peasant, but you can imagine yourself as a brave knight slaying monsters and winning the hand of a beautiful princess. For a few minutes, you're someone else, somewhere else, doing something heroic. Games are played, though they're simpler than modern games. Dice games are popular, usually involving gambling. You bet small amounts, maybe pebbles or food, on the outcome of dice rolls. The church condemns gambling, but people do it anyway. What's the church going to do? Excommunicate everyone? Actually, yes, they might, so you're discreet about it. Children play games that would be recognizable today. Tag, hide and seek, simple ball games. They play with toys made from scraps, wood carved into figures, dolls made from cloth. They don't have much, but they're imaginative. A stick becomes a sword. A pile of dirt becomes a castle. Wrestling and other physical competitions are popular, especially among young men. It's entertainment and training. Peasants might be called to fight in the Lord's army, so staying strong and learning to fight has practical value. Plus, it's fun. You get to show off your strength, prove yourself to peers, maybe impress potential wives. Animal sports exist, but are often cruel by modern standards. Bear baiting, where dogs attack a chained bear. Cockfighting, where roosters fight to the death. These are considered entertainment. People gather, place bets, cheer for their favorites. The suffering of animals isn't a concern. Life is hard for everyone. Why should animals be different? Hunting for nobles is sport. For peasants, it's illegal. The forests are the Lord's, and the game in them belongs to Him. If you're caught poaching deer, you can be punished severely, possibly executed. But hunger makes criminals. You risk it sometimes, setting snares for rabbits or small birds, hoping you're not caught. When you do catch something, it's a victory. Not just food, but a small rebellion. You've taken something from the Lord without permission. It's thrilling in a way modern people can't understand. Your entire life is controlled by others. This tiny act of defiance feels enormous. Taverns are centers of social life in villages and towns. They're more than just places to drink. They're where people gather to exchange news, conduct business, find entertainment. The ale is weak but plentiful. The atmosphere is loud and crowded. You drink, you talk, you laugh. For a few hours, you forget your troubles. Drinking is a major pastime. Not to excess usually, because most ale is weak, but constantly. You drink with meals, during work breaks, in the evening. It's safer than water and more pleasant. Drunkenness happens, especially during festivals. The church disapproves, but again, people do it anyway. Sex, though not discussed openly, is a form of entertainment and bonding. The church teaches that sex is only for procreation within marriage, but people ignore this frequently. Premarital sex is common. Affairs happen. Prostitution exists. People find ways to satisfy physical desires despite religious prohibitions. Contraception is unreliable and often ineffective. Withdrawal, herbal remedies, magical talismans. None of them work consistently. So sex often leads to pregnancy, which leads to more mouths to feed, which creates more hardship. But in the moment, people don't think about consequences. They think about pleasure and connection. Markets are entertainment as well as commerce. When merchants come to town, it's an event. You see goods you've never seen before. Fabrics from distant lands, spices from exotic places, tools and trinkets. You can't afford most of it, but you can look. You can imagine owning something beautiful. Performers sometimes appear at markets. Jugglers, acrobats, magicians. Their skills seem miraculous to people who've never seen such things. A man who can keep 3 balls in the air simultaneously is practicing witchcraft or possesses extraordinary talent. Either way, it's amazing. Religious pageants and mystery plays are performed, especially during holidays. These dramatize Bible stories, teaching religious lessons through entertainment. The performances are crude by modern standards, but they're spectacular to medieval audiences. Actors wear costumes, use props, sometimes even create special effects with fireworks or mechanical devices. Gossip is perhaps the most universal entertainment. Who's sleeping with whom? Who's in debt? Who's sick? Who had a fight with their neighbor? Information about other people's lives is fascinating when your own life is so constrained. You gather in small groups and share what you know, speculating about what you don't know. The church condemns gossip as sinful, but that doesn't stop anyone. Gossip is how you learn about the world beyond your immediate experience. It's how reputation is built and destroyed. It's how social norms are enforced. And it's fun, in a guilty pleasure sort of way. Fights and arguments, while not exactly entertainment, provide drama. When 2 people have a dispute, the whole village pays attention. Everyone takes sides. The argument might be resolved peacefully, or it might escalate to violence. Either way, it's more interesting than another day of plowing fields. Weddings and baptisms are celebratory events. Even poor families try to make them special. There's food, drink, music, dancing. These rituals mark important transitions, but they're also parties. Everyone is invited because everyone knows everyone. You celebrate together because community is survival. Funerals, strangely, also have entertainment aspects. After the burial, there's often a gathering with food and drink. Stories are told about the deceased. People laugh and cry. It's about memory and connection, maintaining bonds between the living even as someone has passed to death. Seasonal activities provide variation. In spring, May Day celebrations with dancing around poles and crowning a May Queen. In autumn, harvest festivals with feasting and thanks. In winter, Christmas and its associated traditions. These create rhythm and structure, points of light in the monotonous calendar. Sex and scatological humor are huge in medieval entertainment. Jokes about bodily functions, explicit sexual content, crude humor. The church might preach purity, but popular culture is remarkably bawdy. People find humor in the things everyone experiences, but aren't supposed to discuss. Even work has social elements that make it bearable. Harvest involves entire communities working together, singing songs, sharing meals. Spinning and weaving are often done in groups, women gathering to work and talk. Men working construction or repairs cooperate and joke with each other. The entertainment available to medieval people is limited by modern standards, but they make the most of what they have. They find joy in small things, connections with others, moments of pleasure in lives filled with difficulty, because without these moments, life would be unbearable. You need entertainment to stay sane. You need laughter to balance tears. You need community to survive isolation. Medieval people understand this. They create traditions, festivals, rituals that provide meaning and enjoyment, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. So yes, medieval life is hard, but it's not completely joyless. There are moments of light in the darkness, laughter in the pain, love in the suffering. These moments make survival possible. They're what keep people going day after day, year after year, generation after generation. Entertainment in the Middle Ages is less about distraction and more about affirmation. It reminds you that you're human, not just a work animal. It connects you to others, creating bonds that make communal survival possible. It provides hope that life is worth living, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Chapter 10. The Village Community. Your extended family, whether you like it or not. Timestamp: 1 hour 45 minutes. Let's talk about the village because this is where you spend your entire life. Not by choice, but because travel is expensive, dangerous, and generally pointless. Where would you go? Every village is basically the same. Same struggles, same poverty, same endless work. So you stay put, and everyone around you stays put, and you all know each other far too well. The village population is probably between 50 and 300 people, depending on location and resources, small enough that you know everyone's name, their family history, their business. You know who's having an affair, who drinks too much, who hasn't paid their debts. Privacy doesn't exist. Your life is an open book because there's nowhere to hide. Houses are clustered together, often sharing walls. The village is organized around a central area, usually near the church. The Lord's Manor sits apart on higher ground, visible from everywhere, a constant reminder of hierarchy. Then there are the peasant houses, small and similar, because no one has resources for anything fancy. Everyone is related to everyone, often in complicated ways. Your neighbor is your cousin. Your wife's sister married your brother. The blacksmith is your uncle. The miller is married to your aunt. This creates a web of relationships that's both supportive and suffocating. You can't escape family drama because family is literally everywhere. Chapter 11. Crime and Punishment. You've been accused of stealing a chicken. Did you do it? Maybe. Probably. You were hungry, the chicken was there, and taking it seemed like a solution. Now you're standing in front of the Lord's bailiff, and things are not looking good for you. Welcome to medieval justice, where the punishment definitely doesn't fit the crime, and you have essentially no rights. Medieval law is a confusing mess of different systems. There's royal law, church law, feudal law, and local custom, all overlapping and often contradicting each other. Which laws apply to you depends on your status, location, and who you've offended. It's arbitrary and unpredictable, which makes it terrifying. For minor offenses within the village, the community handles things informally. You stole from a neighbor. You pay them back, plus extra as punishment. Maybe you do some work for them. The village headman oversees this, ensuring fairness or at least resolution. It's not official court, but practical justice that keeps the community functioning. More serious offenses go to the manor court, presided over by the lord or his bailiff. This court handles disputes between peasants, breaches of feudal obligations, and crimes that affect the lord's interests. Justice here is swift and focused on maintaining order and the lord's authority. Trials in manor court are not what you'd recognize as fair. There's no lawyer representing you, no presumption of innocence. The bailiff asks questions, hears testimony, and makes decisions based on reputation, plausibility, and frankly, whether he likes you. Evidence is less important than perception. Witnesses can speak for or against you, but their credibility varies by status. A freeman's testimony counts more than a serf's. A man's word carries more weight than a woman's. If the lord or a noble speaks against you, you're doomed regardless of truth. Status determines credibility more than honesty. Common punishments include fines, which are problematic when you have no money. The fine might be paid in goods, labor, or livestock. This further impoverishes you, making life even harder. But it's better than physical punishment or death, so you pay and hope you can recover. The stocks are used for public humiliation. You're locked in a wooden frame in the village center, unable to move, while people mock you, throw garbage, or worse. It's uncomfortable and degrading. The point is shame, making you an example so others don't commit similar offenses. Does it work? Somewhat. People do want to avoid public humiliation. Flogging is common for more serious offenses. You're tied to a post and whipped with a leather strap or wooden rod. The number of lashes depends on the crime's severity. You're stripped to the waist, struck repeatedly while villagers watch. It's painful and humiliating, leaving scars physical and psychological. For serious crimes like murder, rape, or treason, execution is the standard punishment. Methods vary. Hanging is most common for commoners. You're led to a gallows, a noose placed around your neck, and you're dropped or pushed off a platform. Death comes from a broken neck if you're lucky, or slow suffocation if you're not. Beheading is typically reserved for nobles. It's considered more honorable than hanging. A skilled executioner can do it in one blow. An unskilled one might need several attempts, which is horrific for everyone involved. You kneel, place your head on a block, and hope for the best. Burning at the stake is reserved for heretics and witches. You're tied to a wooden stake surrounded by kindling and set on fire. Death comes from smoke inhalation before the flames reach you, hopefully. It's a terrible death, meant to terrify onlookers and purify the accused's soul through suffering. Mutilation is used for specific crimes. Thieves might have a hand cut off. Liars might have their tongue cut out. It's permanent punishment that marks the offender visibly, warning others of their crimes. It also disables them, making survival harder, sometimes impossible. Trial by ordeal is still practiced in some areas, though it's declining by the later Middle Ages. The idea is that God will protect the innocent and punish the guilty through miraculous intervention. Different ordeals test this. Trial by hot iron involves carrying a red-hot iron bar for a certain distance. Your hand is then bandaged and examined after 3 days. If it's healing cleanly, you're innocent. If it's infected, you're guilty. Obviously, most people get infected because the burn is severe and medieval hygiene is terrible. So most people are found guilty. Chapter 12. Women's Lives. You wake up before dawn, same as always, but today's different. Today you're not just a peasant, you're a woman, and that changes everything. Welcome to medieval life on hard mode, where all the regular difficulties are compounded by being female in a society that considers you property at best and evil incarnate at worst. Let's start with the basics. You have no legal rights. 0. You can't own property in your own name. You can't make contracts. You can't testify in many courts. You're legally under the control of your father until you marry, then under your husband's control. If he dies, you might fall under your son's control. You're never independent, never autonomous, never free. The church teaches that women are inferior to men by divine design. Eve tempted Adam, bringing sin into the world. Therefore, all women carry the stain of Eve's transgression. You're prone to sin, weak-willed, easily corrupted. Men must control you for your own good and society's protection. This isn't subtext. It's official doctrine, preached from every pulpit. Your body isn't yours. It belongs to your father, then your husband. He has rights to it, you don't. Marital rape isn't a concept. A husband can't rape his wife because he owns her sexually. If he wants sex, you submit. Refusing is grounds for punishment, legal and physical. Your consent is irrelevant. Virginity before marriage is absolutely required. Your value as a bride depends largely on your intact hymen. If you're not a virgin, you're damaged goods, unmarriageable except to desperate men or widowers. The man you marry doesn't need to be a virgin. In fact, experience is considered positive for him. The double standard is blatant and unquestioned. Marriage isn't your choice. Your father arranges it, considering economic benefit and family alliances. You might meet your husband once before the wedding, or not at all. Love is irrelevant. Compatibility doesn't matter. You're being traded, essentially, from one man to another. Your feelings about this are nobody's concern. You marry young, probably between 12 and 16 for peasants, sometimes even younger for nobles. Your body might not be fully developed. You might not understand what's happening. Too bad. You're a woman now, and that means wife, and that means sex and childbearing, whether you're ready or not. Your wedding night is traumatic if you're unprepared, which you probably are. Nobody explains sex to you beforehand. You figure it out through painful experience. Your husband might be gentle, but he might not. You have no say. You endure and hope it gets better with time. Childbearing is your primary purpose in life. You're expected to produce children, preferably sons, as many as possible. Pregnancy is almost constant during your childbearing years. You get pregnant, give birth, nurse for a few months, get pregnant again. This cycle repeats until menopause or death. Each pregnancy is a brush with death. Maternal mortality is roughly 1 to 2% per birth. Doesn't sound high until you realize you might have 8 to 10 pregnancies. Your cumulative risk of dying in childbirth approaches 20 to 30%. Russian roulette has better odds. Every pregnancy might kill you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Labor and delivery happen at home with a midwife assisting. No pain relief beyond alcohol or herbal remedies that don't work well. You labor for hours or days, screaming, bleeding, praying. The midwife does her best, but she has limited knowledge and no tools. If complications arise, you probably die. Complications are common. Breech babies, twins, excessive bleeding, infections. Any of these can kill you. The baby might die too, or survive while you don't. Your husband will remarry quickly. He needs a wife to care for his children and household. You're replaceable. If you survive childbirth, you might suffer permanent damage. Tears that don't heal properly, causing chronic pain. Fistulas that lead to incontinence. Prolapsed uterus. These conditions are humiliating and debilitating, but there's no treatment. You live with the damage for the rest of your life. Infant mortality means you'll lose children, probably several. You give birth to 8 children, maybe 5 survive to adulthood. Each death tears your heart, but you're expected to accept it and move on. Grieving too long is self-indulgent. You have living children who need you and work that must be done. Your work is endless. You manage the household, cook all meals, bake bread, brew ale, preserve food, make clothes, clean, garden, raise children, care for animals, and help in the fields during busy seasons. You work from dawn to well past dusk, every single day. There are no breaks, no vacations, no days off. Chapter 13. superstition, and magic. It's midnight, and your youngest child is sick. Fever, chills, vomiting. You've tried everything you know, but nothing helps. So now you're standing at the edge of the forest, whispering an incantation while burying a charm under an oak tree. Is this religion? Magic? Medicine? In the Middle Ages, the lines blur so much they're barely visible. Medieval people live in a world they don't understand. They don't know what causes disease, why crops fail, why some years bring prosperity and others disaster. Science doesn't exist in any meaningful sense. So they fill the gaps with superstition, magic, and desperate hope that somehow they can influence forces beyond their control. Everything has meaning. A black cat crossing your path, a bird flying into your house, a dream about death. These aren't random events. They're omens, messages from the spiritual world about future events. You pay attention, looking for patterns, trying to predict what's coming so you can prepare or prevent it. Omens are taken seriously. If a comet appears, it means war or plague or the death of a king. Comets are rare enough that when they do appear, something significant usually happens afterward. Confirmation bias at work, but medieval people see cause and effect where only correlation exists. Animal behavior predicts weather and fortune. Cows lying down means rain is coming. Birds flying low means storms. A rooster crowing at unusual times means death is near. You watch animals constantly, interpreting their behavior as messages about the future. Dreams are prophetic. If you dream about water, someone will die. If you dream about teeth falling out, you'll lose a family member. If you dream about snakes, enemies are plotting against you. Every morning, you analyze your dreams, trying to understand what they're telling you about the day ahead. Numbers have significance. 7 is lucky, 13 is unlucky. 3 is powerful, associated with the Trinity. You count things in meaningful numbers, hoping to attract good fortune or avoid bad. You make decisions based on numerology, not logic. The moon controls everything. Plant crops during the waxing moon, they'll grow strong. Plant during the waning moon, they'll fail. Cut your hair during a full moon for thick growth. The moon affects fertility, health, even your mood. You plan life around lunar cycles because everyone knows the moon has power. Saints are petitioned for specific needs, but the line between prayer and spell is thin. You recite prayers a specific number of times. You light candles. You leave offerings. You perform rituals that look suspiciously like magic, but are sanctioned by the church because they're directed at saints rather than demons. Holy water is a magical substance. Blessed by a priest, it protects against evil. You sprinkle it on your house, your animals, your children. You carry a vial of it when traveling. You add it to sick people's drinks. Is it sacred or magical? Both? Neither? You don't care as long as it works. Relics have power. A bone fragment from a saint, a piece of cloth that touched holy remains. These objects perform miracles, cure diseases, protect from harm. You save money to buy a relic, even knowing it's probably fake. The belief in its power might be what matters, not the relic itself. Charms and amulets are everywhere. You wear a rabbit's foot for luck. You hang horseshoes over doors to ward off evil. You keep acorns in your pocket to prevent illness. These objects are imbued with protective power through rituals, prayers, or simply through tradition. Everyone has them. Herbal remedies are practical medicine and magic combined. Certain plants heal certain ailments, knowledge passed down through generations. But herbs are also used in spells. You might brew the same plant as tea for medicine or burn it while chanting for magical purposes. The context determines whether it's healing or witchcraft. Wise women or cunning folk exist in most communities. They're healers, midwives, fortune tellers, and spellcasters. You go to them for pregnancy issues, love problems, curses, or blessings. They occupy a dangerous middle ground between helpful and heretical. The church tolerates them grudgingly because people need their services. These practitioners use folk magic that predates Christianity. They know incantations, create potions, read signs. They might claim to work through God's power or saints, but their methods are older than the church. They're careful to frame their work as Christian to avoid accusations of witchcraft. Love magic is particularly popular. You want someone to fall in love with you, you need a spell. Maybe you obtain a lock of their hair, brew it in a potion, recite words over it. Maybe you bury something under their doorstep. These spells probably don't work, but desperation makes people try anything. Chapter 14. War and Violence. You're in the fields when you see smoke on the horizon. Not the smoke from cooking fires. Black smoke, lots of it. The village alarm bell starts ringing frantically. Your stomach drops. Raiders are coming. Maybe bandits. Maybe a rival lord's army. Maybe just soldiers who decided your village looks like easy pickings. Doesn't matter. They're coming. And you're about to learn that medieval warfare is everyone's problem. Medieval people like to think war is for nobles and knights. They're wrong. War affects everyone, especially peasants who can't protect themselves and have everything to lose. Armies need food. Lots of food. They take it from the countryside they march through. They don't pay. They don't ask permission. They arrive, demand everything you have, and take it by force if you resist. Your stored grain, your livestock, your vegetables, gone. You're left with nothing, facing starvation because some lord decided to have a territorial dispute. This isn't occasional. Medieval Europe is constantly at war. Local conflicts between nobles, larger wars between kingdoms, crusades, rebellions. War is the default state. Peace is the exception. You might experience multiple invasions or raids in your lifetime. Soldiers are dangerous even when they're supposedly on your side. Mercenaries and men-at-arms are violent, poorly disciplined, and see peasants as resources to exploit. They steal, assault, murder. Complain to their commanders? Good luck. The commanders don't care what happens to peasants as long as their men are ready to fight. Rape is common during wartime. Soldiers view women as spoils of war. They attack villages specifically to rape and loot. Age doesn't protect you. Neither does marriage or anything else. You're a woman in a war zone. That's all that matters. The trauma is terrible, and there's no support system to help survivors cope. If you're lucky, raiders take your supplies and leave. If you're unlucky, they burn your village. They set fire to houses, barns, crops in fields. Why? Sometimes strategic, denying resources to enemies. Sometimes just destruction for its own sake, terrorizing populations into submission. You lose everything in a fire. Your house, your tools, your stored food, your animals. You're left with nothing but your life, and even that's not guaranteed. People die in fires, trapped or overcome by smoke. Survivors face homelessness and starvation. Rebuilding takes years, assuming you survive long enough to try. Scorched earth tactics are common. An army retreats, destroying everything as they go so the pursuing army finds nothing to sustain themselves. This devastates civilian populations caught between two armies. Your village, your crops, your livelihood destroyed not because you did anything wrong, but because you exist in a war zone. Sieges are particularly brutal for civilians. An army surrounds a town or castle and waits for surrender. Food runs out. Starvation begins. Disease spreads in crowded, unsanitary conditions. People die slowly while the besiegers sit outside, patient and well supplied. If you're in a besieged location, you face impossible choices. Surrender and hope for mercy. Fight and possibly die. Try to escape and risk being killed? There are no good options. Most sieges end with the defenders surrendering after conditions become unbearable. Then the attackers often slaughter survivors anyway. Plagues follow armies. Soldiers carry diseases from place to place. Their camps are breeding grounds for typhus, dysentery, and other killers. These diseases spread to civilian populations. An army passing through might leave an epidemic that kills more people than the actual fighting. Conscription happens. Lords need soldiers, so they draft peasants. You're given basic weapons, minimal training, and sent to fight. You have no choice. Refusing means punishment or death. You go to war, terrified and unprepared, facing professional soldiers or armored knights. Peasant soldiers are cannon fodder. You're expendable. You're placed in the front lines, absorbing the initial attack while valuable knights stay behind. Your life means nothing to commanders. If you die, they conscript someone else. If you flee, they execute you for cowardice. Fighting without armor is terrifying. Knights have metal protection. You have cloth or leather at best. Arrows pierce you easily. Swords cut deep. You're vulnerable to every weapon. Your only defense is a wooden shield and hope. Medieval weapons are brutal. Swords, axes, maces, warhammers, all designed to kill or maim. Wounds are terrible. A sword cut opens you to the bone. An axe blow crushes skulls. A mace smashes bones. Even if you survive the initial injury, infection usually kills you later. Chapter 15. Survival Strategies and Daily Wisdom. So you've made it this far. You've survived disease, hunger, cold, violence, and a social system designed to keep you oppressed. Congratulations, you're beating the odds. But survival in the Middle Ages isn't about luck alone. It's about knowledge, strategy, and learning from generations of people who figured out how to not die. Let's talk about the actual tactics medieval people used to make it through each day, week, and year. First rule: never waste anything. Ever. That piece of string? Keep it. That broken tool? Save the pieces for repairs. That moldy bread? Cut off the moldy parts and eat the rest. Medieval people can't afford waste because they have so little. Everything has value. Everything can be reused or repurposed. Clothes are mended until they're more patch than original fabric. When they're finally too worn to wear, they're torn into rags for cleaning. When the rags fall apart, they're used as stuffing for mattresses or insulation. When they're too deteriorated even for that, they're composted. You extract every possible use from everything you own. Food scraps feed animals. Animal waste fertilizes gardens. Ashes from fires are used for soap making or spread on fields. Water used for washing vegetables waters plants. Nothing goes to waste because waste is luxury you can't afford. Second rule: maintain your tools obsessively. Your tools are your livelihood. A broken plow or spade means you can't work, which means you starve. You care for tools better than you care for yourself. You clean them after use, sharpen them regularly, oil them to prevent rust, store them carefully. Your life literally depends on your tools functioning. You learn basic blacksmithing and carpentry, enough to make simple repairs. You can't afford to hire someone for every small fix. You develop skills beyond your primary trade because versatility increases survival chances. Third rule: know your environment intimately. Which plants are edible, where to find water, which trees burn best, where animals den, when plants bloom or fruit ripen. This knowledge comes from years of observation and teaching from elders. It's practical ecology, learned not from books but from necessity. You know weather patterns for your area, what cloud formations mean rain, what wind directions bring storms, when frost typically arrives. This helps you time farming activities, preserving food, and preparing for bad weather. You're not always right, but you're right often enough to improve your odds. Fourth rule: build and maintain relationships. Community is survival insurance. You help neighbors because eventually you'll need their help. You maintain family ties because family is your safety net. You participate in communal activities even when tired because isolation is dangerous. You're careful with reputation. Being known as reliable, helpful, and trustworthy means people will assist you in crises. Being known as lazy, selfish, or troublesome means isolation when you most need support. Medieval survival is social as much as practical. You cultivate relationships with the powerful carefully, the lord's bailiff, the priest, the wealthier peasants. You are respectful without being obsequious, helpful without being exploited. You navigate social hierarchies with care because the wrong enemy can destroy you. Fifth rule: preserve food like your life depends on it, because it does. Summer's abundance must carry you through winter's scarcity. You're constantly thinking about preservation, drying vegetables in the sun, salting what little meat you have, pickling vegetables in brine, smoking fish, storing grain in dry places. You learn to identify when food is starting to spoil. You eat things in specific orders, consuming what will spoil first, saving what keeps longer. You rotate stored supplies, moving older items to the front. Food management is constant mental labor. You forage aggressively during growing seasons. Berries, nuts, edible plants, mushrooms if you know which are safe. These supplement your diet and provide variety. Children are taught young which plants to gather, making foraging a family activity that bonds while providing food. Sixth rule: prepare for winter starting in spring. You don't wait until autumn to think about cold weather. Every decision from planting onward considers winter needs. How much firewood will you need? How much food? What repairs must be done before cold makes them impossible? You gather materials all year: fallen branches for firewood, straw for animal bedding and insulation, wool from your sheep if you have them, spun into yarn for clothing. Winter preparation is year-round activity, not seasonal panic. You insulate your house as best you can, stuffing gaps in walls with moss or straw, piling dirt against walls for insulation, hanging cloth over windows. These small actions make significant difference between bearable cold and deadly cold. Chapter 16: Religion and Daily Life. It's Sunday morning again, but this time let's talk about what religion actually means in your daily life beyond just showing up at church. Because in the Middle Ages, religion isn't a hobby or a choice or even just a belief system. It's the framework around which your entire existence is built. Every action, every thought, every decision is filtered through religious understanding. You literally cannot imagine life without God and the church. You wake up and immediately pray. Not formal prayers necessarily, just acknowledgement of another day gifted by God. You thank Him for survival through the night, ask for protection through the day ahead. This takes seconds, but happens automatically. Prayer is as natural as breathing. Before eating anything, you pray. Blessing food is mandatory. Even if it's just a crust of bread, even if you're starving, you pause to thank God for providing sustenance. Going without food is bad. Eating without blessing it is worse because it's spiritually dangerous. During work, you pray periodically, not stopping work to kneel, but brief prayers while laboring. God help me. Lord have mercy. Blessed Virgin, intercede. These short prayers punctuate your day, maintaining connection with the divine while accomplishing necessary tasks. Church bells structure your day more than clocks, which don't exist for peasants. Bells mark religious hours: prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. You don't know these formal names necessarily, but you hear the bells and know roughly what time it is. Early morning, midday, afternoon, evening. Your schedule follows the church's rhythm. Everything is explained through religious framework. Why did your crop fail? God is testing your faith or punishing your sins. Why did your child die? God needed another angel, or the child is better off in heaven than in this sinful world. Why is life so hard? This world is temporary. Real life comes after death. These explanations seem hollow to modern people who want practical answers. But for medieval people, they provide meaning and comfort. Random suffering is unbearable. Suffering with divine purpose is tolerable. If God has a plan, Even terrible events have meaning. You confess sins regularly, not just the mandatory annual confession. You visit the priest when you feel particularly burdened by guilt. You confess anger, envy, lust, pride, sloth. Basically, normal human emotions are redefined as sins requiring repentance. The priest assigns penance, prayers to recite, fasting days, charity if you have anything to give. You perform penance seriously because your eternal soul depends on it. Dying with unconfessed sins means hell. That threat makes compliance automatic. Holy days interrupt work schedules frequently. Saints' feast days, religious festivals, church celebrations. On these days, you're forbidden from most labor. You must attend special services, participate in community observances. It sounds like breaks from work, and sometimes it is welcome. Other times, it's frustrating because work is endless and holy days mean falling further behind. But you don't complain. Complaining about holy days is blasphemous. You attend church, you pretend to be pious, and you use whatever free time remains for rest or personal projects. The church giveth days off, and the church taketh away your productivity. Fasting is regular occurrence. Lent lasts 40 days with restrictions on eating. Fridays are meatless. Various saints' days require fasting. Ember days, 4 sets of 3-day fasts quarterly. Vigils before major feast days. You're fasting a significant portion of the year. Fasting rules are detailed and somewhat bizarre. No meat, dairy, or eggs on fast days. Fish is allowed because medieval theologians decided fish aren't meat. You can't afford fish usually, so fasting means eating less of the limited diet you already have. You're hungry all the time anyway. Fasting makes it worse. The wealthy can afford to buy dispensations from fasting, paying the church to excuse them from religious obligations. You can't. You fast because you must, watching rich people eat meat on Fridays while you gnaw bread. The hypocrisy is obvious, but never acknowledged. Religious art and symbolism are everywhere despite your poverty. A crude wooden cross hangs in your house, maybe a painted icon or a cheap religious medallion. These objects are protective as much as devotional. They ward off evil, bless your home, remind demons that this space belongs to God. Saints' images are particularly important. You have personal devotion to specific saints, maybe the saint of your village church, or a saint associated with your profession, or a saint whose feast day is your birthday. You pray to your saints, asking for their intercession with God. Chapter 17. Children and Family. Your wife is pregnant again. This is the 7th time. You've got 4 living children already. You lost 2 in infancy, and honestly, you're terrified this might happen again. But pregnancy is just what happens when you're married. There's no reliable contraception, the church forbids it anyway, and sex is one of the few pleasures available in your miserable life. So here you are, about to add another mouth to feed in a household that already struggles to have enough. Let's talk about medieval childhood, because it's nothing like modern childhood. Children aren't protected, indulged, or given time to just be kids. They're future laborers, and their training starts early. Very early. Pregnancy is announced cautiously. You don't tell everyone immediately because early miscarriages are common. Maybe after a few months, when your wife starts showing, you mention it to neighbors. They offer congratulations mixed with realistic warnings. Childbirth is dangerous. They've all lost someone to it. Your wife continues working throughout pregnancy. There's no maternity leave. She's in the fields, tending animals, cooking, doing all her regular tasks while growing a human. She works until labor starts, literally. Stories of women giving birth in fields between rows of crops aren't exaggerations. Work doesn't stop for pregnancy. When labor begins, you're sent away. This is women's business. The midwife is summoned, female neighbors arrive, and they take over. You wait outside or in a different room, listening to your wife's screams and praying she survives. Labor can last hours or days. Medieval people have no way to speed it up or ease the pain significantly. Your wife endures, pushing when told, breathing when told, suffering until the baby emerges or she dies trying. The midwife does her best, but her tools and knowledge are limited. If complications arise, there's little to be done. Breech babies often die, taking their mothers with them. Excessive bleeding kills quickly. Infections kill slowly. The midwife makes decisions based on experience and tradition, not medical science. Sometimes she's right, sometimes she's not. The baby arrives, finally. If it's breathing and seems healthy, everyone exhales with relief. If it's not breathing, the midwife tries to revive it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Stillbirths are common enough that people have seen them before. It's sad, but not shocking. The baby is cleaned, wrapped, and presented to you. You examine it carefully, looking for deformities or problems. Is it healthy? Does it have all its fingers and toes? Can it nurse? These questions determine whether the child will survive long enough to be worth naming. Gender matters enormously. A boy is celebrated. Boys work the land, carry on the family name, support parents in old age. A girl is accepted but less enthusiastically. Girls are useful for household work, but they'll eventually marry and join another family. You've invested in raising them only to lose them. If you already have several daughters, another one might be genuinely disappointing. You need sons, but you accept what God gives you and hope the next child is male. You can't control it. You can only adapt. The baby is baptized quickly, usually within days of birth. This is urgent. If the baby dies before baptism, it goes to limbo, a place for unbaptized souls. Not hell, but not heaven either. Just existence without God's presence forever. You can't risk that. The baby must be baptized immediately. The baptism is simple. The priest pours holy water on the baby's head, says the words, and the child is officially Christian. You choose godparents, people who promise to help raise the child in the faith. This creates additional family bonds, connecting your family to others in the community. Now comes the tricky part, keeping the baby alive. Infant mortality is roughly 30 to 40%. 1 in 3 babies dies before age 5. The reasons are numerous: disease, malnutrition, accidents, sudden infant death syndrome that no one understands. You can do everything right and still lose your child. You delay naming the baby for a few weeks, sometimes months. It seems cruel, but it's protective. Getting attached to something that might die causes unbearable pain. Better to wait until the baby proves hardy before investing emotionally. If the baby dies unnamed, it's somehow easier to bear. You tried not to love it yet, but eventually, the baby survives long enough that you risk naming it. Often, you reuse names of dead siblings. Your first son was Thomas, and he died at 6 months. Your second son is also Thomas. This honors the memory and, superstitiously, might transfer some of the first Thomas's life force to the second. Probably doesn't work, but it makes you feel better. Chapter 18. Old age, if you're lucky enough to get there. You wake up, and your back screams in protest. Your joints ache. Your hands are twisted with arthritis. Your teeth, what's left of them, hurt constantly. You're 53 years old, and you feel ancient. Welcome to old age in the Middle Ages. You're one of the lucky ones who made it this far. Most people don't. But lucky is a relative term because being old in medieval times is its own special hell. First, let's be clear about what old means. In the Middle Ages, old age starts around 45 to 50. If you've survived to 50, you've outlived most of your generation. You've beaten disease, famine, accidents, and childbirth if you're a woman. You're a survivor. But survival comes with a price, and that price is a body that's breaking down with no way to fix it. Your appearance has changed dramatically. Your hair is gray or white if you haven't lost it. Your face is deeply lined from years of outdoor work and sun exposure. Your skin is tough and weathered like old leather. You're missing teeth, making eating difficult and speaking unclear. You've probably lost height as your spine compresses. You look like you've lived hard because you have. Your strength is failing. Work that was easy at 20 is agonizing at 50. Lifting, digging, bending. Everything takes longer and hurts more. You can't maintain the pace you once did. Younger people pass you in the fields. You watch them work with efficiency you no longer possess, and remember when that was you. Your senses are declining. Vision blurs, making detailed work impossible. No glasses exist to correct it. You just struggle to see clearly, squinting constantly, giving yourself headaches. Your hearing fades, making conversations difficult. People have to shout at you, which is embarrassing. You mishear things, respond inappropriately, feel isolated. Memory becomes unreliable. You forget what you were doing. You lose track of conversations. Names escape you. Is this normal aging or something worse? No one knows. Dementia isn't diagnosed or understood. People just say you're getting senile. They speak louder and slower, treating you like a child. The pain is constant. Arthritis in your hands and knees makes movement agony. Old injuries never healed properly and hurt worse with age. Your back, strained from decades of labor, barely functions. You wake up stiff, loosen up slightly during the day, and stiffen again by evening. Pain is your new normal. There's no pain medication beyond alcohol and maybe willow bark tea if someone knows to make it. You just endure. Complaining is pointless. Everyone's in pain. Yours is worse because you're older, but sympathy is limited. People have their own problems. Your work capacity diminishes, which is terrifying. Your value in medieval society is based on productivity. If you can't work, you're a burden. You try to continue contributing, doing lighter tasks, mending tools, watching children, preparing food, anything to remain useful. Your family's reaction varies. Some children care for aging parents lovingly, respecting their sacrifice and wisdom. Others resent the burden. You're eating food they need for their children. You're taking up space. You're one more mouth in a household already stretched thin. The resentment isn't always spoken, but it's felt. If you're a woman and your husband is dead, you're especially vulnerable. Widows without sons to protect them are targets for exploitation. People try to steal your possessions, cheat you in transactions, or force you off your land. You have minimal legal protection and declining ability to defend yourself. Some widows remarry older widowers, creating practical partnerships. You manage his household. He provides shelter and protection. It's not romantic. It's survival strategy. Two old people together have better odds than one old person alone. If you're a man and your wife is dead, you're in somewhat better position legally, but still struggling. Who cooks your food? Who manages the household? Who cares for you when you're sick? You might remarry a younger woman, trading security for labor. Or you depend on children or siblings to fill these gaps. Your social status shifts. If you were respected for skills or wisdom, people still value you. They seek your advice on farming, crafts, or community matters. You're a repository of decades of experience. This gives you purpose and respect. But if you were never particularly skilled or wise, old age doesn't magically make you valuable. You're just old and useless. People tolerate you out of duty or custom, not genuine respect. You feel this. It hurts. The church teaches that respecting elders is moral duty. The commandment to honor your parents applies at all ages. But reality doesn't always match ideals. Some elderly are honored. Others are neglected or mistreated. Your treatment depends on personality, relationships, and luck. So here you are. You've survived a day, a week, a year, maybe even several decades in the Middle Ages. You're still alive, which honestly, congratulations. The odds were spectacularly not in your favor. But before we close this chapter of medieval misery, let's talk about what survival actually meant and what we can learn from people who endured centuries of what we'd consider absolute hell. First, let's be honest about something. Survival was the victory. Not prosperity, not happiness, not fulfillment. Just making it to tomorrow. Medieval people didn't dream of self-actualization or finding their passion. They dreamed of having enough food, staying warm, and not watching their children die. Those modest goals were incredibly difficult to achieve. The average medieval peasant worked harder than almost anyone in the modern developed world. 14-hour days were normal. Physical labor that would hospitalize most modern people was daily routine. And for what? Enough food to barely sustain life. A damp, smoky house shared with animals. Clothes that were little more than rags. If you measured success by material comfort, everyone failed. But that's not how medieval people measured success. They measured it by survival, by family, by community, by faith. Did you make it through winter? Success. Did your children survive to adulthood? Success. Did you maintain your place in the community and your relationship with God? Success. The bar was low because it had to be. Set it any higher and everyone would be failures. Medieval people were tougher than we can imagine. Not because they were genetically different, but because they had to be. Pain was constant, so they learned to work through it. Loss was regular, so they learned to grieve and continue. Injustice was systemic, so they learned to navigate it. They developed psychological resilience out of necessity, but they weren't superhuman. They broke down. They despaired. They gave up. We don't hear much about these people because they didn't survive to pass on their stories. The ones who made it were the tough ones, the lucky ones, the ones who found reasons to keep going despite everything. What kept them going? Several things. Family was crucial. You survived for your children, for your spouse, for your aging parents. Individual life might be worthless, but family continuation mattered. You were a link in a chain stretching back generations and forward to future generations. That gave meaning. Community provided support and identity. You weren't alone in your suffering. Everyone struggled together. When disaster struck your family, neighbors helped. When you had a bit extra, you shared. This mutual aid wasn't altruism. It was practical necessity. Today you help me. Tomorrow I help you. We all survive, or we all perish. Faith provided the framework that made suffering bearable. This life was temporary, a test. Endure it faithfully, and eternal reward awaited. Fail the test, and eternal punishment. This binary gave meaning to even the worst suffering. You weren't suffering randomly. You were being tested by God, and passing the test mattered more than temporary comfort. We modern people might find this faith manipulative, a tool used by the church to keep peasants compliant. And there's truth to that. But it's also true that medieval people genuinely believed, and their belief helped them survive. Whether the belief was true or false is less important than its functional value. It worked. It kept people going when material circumstances suggested giving up. Medieval survival strategies were sophisticated. Multi-generational knowledge about farming, weather, food preservation, herbal medicine, social systems that distributed risk and resources, psychological coping mechanisms that handled trauma and loss. These weren't primitive people stumbling through life. They were intelligent humans adapting to harsh circumstances with creativity and determination. They failed a lot. Crops failed. Children died. Winters killed. Diseases swept through. Wars devastated communities. But enough people survived enough of the time to keep humanity going. That's the miracle of medieval survival. Not that everyone made it, but that anyone did. What can we learn from medieval survival? First, that humans are incredibly adaptable. We can survive conditions we think would be impossible. We're tougher than we believe. Medieval people prove that humans can endure almost anything if we have reasons to continue and strategies to cope. Second, that community matters more than individual strength. Medieval people survived through cooperation, not rugged individualism. The lone wolf died, the pack survived. Modern culture often celebrates individual achievement, but medieval history suggests community resilience is more important. Third, that meaning matters as much as material comfort. Medieval people had almost nothing materially but found meaning in faith, family, and community. Modern people have material abundance but often struggle with meaning. Maybe medieval people understood something we've forgotten, that meaning sustains us more than comfort. Fourth, that suffering doesn't necessarily crush the human spirit. Yes, medieval life was brutal, but people still laughed, loved, celebrated, created art, told stories, found joy. Suffering and joy coexisted. Life wasn't binary, it was complex, containing both darkness and light. Fifth, that perspective matters. Medieval people accepted limitations we would consider intolerable. They didn't expect comfort, convenience, or fairness. Expectations were low, so small pleasures meant more. Maybe our high expectations make us less happy than medieval peasants who expected little and occasionally got something. These lessons aren't arguments for returning to medieval conditions. Medieval life was genuinely terrible by almost any objective measure. Life expectancy was low, infant mortality was high, violence was common, injustice was systemic. No one should romanticize the Middle Ages, but we can respect what medieval people achieved. They survived centuries of plague, famine, war, and oppression. They maintained civilization when it would have been easier to collapse into chaos. They passed down knowledge, skills, and values that enabled humanity to eventually move past medieval conditions. They were our ancestors. Their blood is our blood. Their DNA is our DNA. The fact that you're reading this means your ancestors survived the Middle Ages and every other hard period of human history. You're the descendant of survivors. That's worth something. The Middle Ages ended eventually. Technology improved. The Renaissance brought new ideas. The scientific revolution changed how people understood the world. The Industrial Revolution transformed how people worked and lived. Slowly, painfully, humanity climbed out of medieval darkness. But it took centuries, and the climb required the foundation medieval people laid through sheer persistent survival. They kept going when giving up would have been easier. They maintained communities when isolation would have been simpler. They had children when celibacy would have been safer. They built, created, and preserved despite everything working against them. So how did people survive the Middle Ages? Through toughness? Yes. Through luck? Absolutely. But also through community, faith, knowledge, and sheer stubborn refusal to quit. They survived because giving up meant extinction, and something in the human spirit resists extinction with every fiber of its being. They survived because they had to, because their children needed them, because their communities depended on them, because their faith required it, because stopping wasn't an option, so they kept going. Medieval people weren't heroes or saints. They were ordinary humans in extraordinary circumstances. They made mistakes. They were sometimes cruel, often ignorant, frequently unjust, but they were also resilient, resourceful, and remarkably persistent. You've spent time with them through this exploration. You've walked in their worn-out shoes, eaten their terrible food, worked their exhausting labor, feared their diseases, believed their beliefs. You've seen that medieval life wasn't romantic or glorious. It was hard, painful, and short. But you've also seen that it was life, real human life with all its complexity. Joy and sorrow, love and hate, hope and despair, all mixed together in ways that might not be so different from modern life. The specifics have changed. But the fundamental human experience? That's remarkably consistent across centuries. The Middle Ages are called the Dark Ages sometimes, usually by people who don't know much about them. They weren't entirely dark. There was light, in faith, in family, in community, in the human determination to continue despite everything. Medieval people survived because they were human, and humans survive. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. We face impossible odds and somehow make it through. Not all of us, but enough. Always enough to continue the story. So the next time you complain about your Wi-Fi being slow or your coffee being wrong, remember your ancestors who survived the Middle Ages. They would find your problems hilarious. They would find your life unimaginably comfortable. They would probably think you're soft and spoiled. And they'd be right. We are soft. We are spoiled. And that's wonderful, because it means we've progressed past the conditions they endured. We've built a world where survival isn't the primary daily concern, where children usually live to adulthood, where starvation is rare and medical care exists. We owe them that debt. They survived so we could be here. They endured so we could thrive. They kept humanity going through centuries when extinction must have seemed likely. The Middle Ages finally ended. The modern world gradually emerged. And the people who survived the medieval period? They didn't live to see the world improve dramatically. They died in the same conditions they were born into. But their persistence made future progress possible. So yes, people survived the Middle Ages. Barely. Painfully. With enormous loss and suffering. But they did it. And in doing so, they proved that humans can survive almost anything. That resilience is our superpower. That community and meaning sustain us through even the darkest times. You've survived this journey through medieval life. You've seen how brutal it was, how unfair, how constant the struggle. But you've also seen the strength of the human spirit, the power of community, the importance of meaning. The Middle Ages are over, but the lessons remain. Toughness matters, community matters, meaning matters. These truths are eternal, as relevant now as they were then. So go forth from this medieval nightmare back into your comfortable modern life. Appreciate your heating, your medicine, your food security. But also remember, you're descended from people who survived worse, much worse. And that strength is in you too, should you ever need it. Because history isn't over. Challenges will come. Maybe not medieval-level challenges, but challenges nonetheless. And when they do, remember your ancestors. Remember how they survived. Remember that humans can endure almost anything if they have reasons to continue and people to continue with. That's how people survived the Middle Ages, and that's how we'll survive whatever comes next. Together, persistently, stubbornly refusing to quit. Just like they did. Welcome back to the 21st century. Wash your hands. They didn't have that luxury.